Hello and welcome to Earth Calling. We're your hosts, Ed and Lazlo. Every week we bring you a fresh slice of online content, sorting through the likes, the memes, the insta-Queens, the swipes, the scrolls, and the Twitter trolls. Together, we're laying down our 21st century digital legacy. So sit back, relax, and buckle in. This is Earth Calling.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Earth Calling, the podcast you continue to listen to for whatever reason, but we're super glad you do because it allows us to research all these random apps and websites for you. This episode is very special because it's the first time we have ever had a guest on Earth Calling, and a very special guest at that. Ooh. I'm delighted to introduce comedian and impressionist Josh Berry, who's with us today. Josh, it's really great to have you with us, and welcome.
Thank you very much. What a nice introduction. Thanks for reading the one I sent over.
I think I did edit it. It was a bit wordy, so we really cut it down.
Clipped it down. I was actually sort of worried that our listeners might be confused between you, Josh, and of course Joshua Berry, the American professional stock car racing driver who comes up if you Google. Do you have a bit of a kind of one-on-one, head-to-head about the Google rankings?
It's a common thing. I often have people turning up at my gigs looking very disappointed, hoping it would be an hour of material on, U-bends, not U-bends, that's toilets, isn't it? Yeah. Not toilets.
S-bends.
There's enough on U-bends in my shows.
But I mean, quite confused when they pitch up at a gig, which is, they thought would be the racing track, and it's just a small little, I'm not saying your gigs are in small buildings.
Well,
that's the last thing I'm saying.
You've said it now.
But there's one thing that very much isn't small, and that is, of course, Joshua's burgeoning social media following, where he boasts a Twitter following of 100,000 people and an Instagram count of, at my last check, about 40,000, which is anything but small and would probably fill a reasonably sized NASCAR stadium in the Midwest. But Josh, I mean, have you ever thought about the fact that you actually command that audience? Have you ever sort of tried to visualize them? That would fill Wembley Stadium with more than Wembley Stadium.
I suppose, but then you got to remember, like, quite a high proportion is like bots. Yeah, I'm sure. Well, I haven't done. You can do the analytics. I saw a YouTuber do it once, and he, like, some people have like 60%. Like Kim Kardashian, I think has like 40% bots or something.
Lots of bots.
So I don't know to what extent they're real people, but I think it's very easy to look at those numbers and become incredibly over, for one's ego to explode, which is of course ridiculous. It's not that meaningful.
I think what I'm sort of slightly worried about, but because when Lazlo and I then look at our follower counts and get told that 60% of our several hundred followers are actually not real people, that's even more depressing. But okay, but I wonder what the bots are. What do they do? Maybe they just sort of spam around on your account trying to get you to follow them. But
yeah, I don't really know. I don't know whether they're Russian affiliated media trying to compromise the political slant of what I'm saying. I don't know, but it certainly looks good, doesn't it? And as far as it feeds into that, I'm pleased.
Do you have aspirations for a blue tick? Do you have a blue tick on either of the two?
I don't have a blue tick, which I think is probably one of the greatest injustices in the history of Western society. I think it's appalling, actually, and I've written to them many times to express. I don't even know what the criterion is, but surely I ought to have one.
I know. What? So you write sort of dear Twitter.
I'm being facetious, but I don't know. No, I mean, it's so. There are plenty of people who refuse a blue tick, which I think that's probably the coolest.
Oh,
having loads of followers and then being like, oh well, I'm not even going to take.
Don't need it.
Yeah. I would compare that to my days playing this online game called RuneScape, where if you got to level 99 mining, but it was your only level 99 skill, you'd receive a cape which was untrimmed. And as opposed to if you had more than one level 99 skill, your cape would be trimmed. So kind of, I'm sure the Earth Calling audience understands where I'm coming from. Yeah,
I think so.
but so for the non-bot listeners at the moment, Josh, some people might not be familiar with you. I think a good deal of audience overlap potentially, but why don't you run us through sort of what it is that you do, how you came to prominence and particularly shot to fame over the lockdown, and just give us a bit of a backstory.
Yeah. So I've been doing comedy now for about 4 years or so since leaving university. And I kind of initially started doing impressions. So I did a lot of tennis players. I started out, doing sort of impressions of like Andy Murray, for example, which was great. And, like John McEnroe as well. And Rafa Nadal as well. All of those things was fantastic. And
I'm just going to pause there. Hang on, Josh. I
want to pause as well. There's many reasons to pause. Just slayed Andy Murray in front of Ed, who I previously thought did a good Andy Murray. It's very tragic to see that he's got his work cut out for him today.
Well, I think what was amazing...
vocal quality for Andy Murray, Ed, I think.
Well, Andy's extremely kind of low, and he always sounds as if he's kind of extremely depressed about everything, whether it be his latest knee injury or, crying at Wimbledon because he slightly cracks in his voice. It's going to be really difficult to see.
I think that's pretty good. But sort of the mistake that, if you don't mind me saying, that I'd sort of say that you're maybe making there is that sort of Andy's actually quite a lot higher than a lot of, because a lot of, what you're doing is sort of like Andy Murray like that, really. Whereas actually, he's sort of slightly higher up in the throat and things are a bit more sort of enunciated like that.
That is quite right. I actually was very but has he got older? No, he's actually the opposite. He's maybe he's got younger, sprightlier. Maybe it depends on how many painkillers he's had to have for his repetitive strain injuries. But you just dived into a Nadal there because of course Lazlo, that's one of your
Oh, sorry.
That was the second reason I was quite anxious because I think Ed and my material has just dwindled massively in the space of 20 or so seconds. But later we can compare and see. Novak had a great game today, and see, I just do generic Spanish and then claim it's Rafa Nadal. That's the issue.
That sounds quite a lot like Fernando Alonso, the racing driver. I'd say. I think
funny
maybe
it does double up as a Alonso impression.
But we digress. Okay, so Josh, you kicked off getting into your tennis impressions, and that was because you were into tennis, or you thought that tennis offered a fecund and fertile breeding ground for impressions, or what was it about that?
I wasn't quite that tactical as a 16-year-old. It was more just from sort of an adoration of those people, and then started doing more impressions. All kinds of people like Gordon Ramsay. Okay, wow, fuck off. And then sort of Louis Theroux as well. I started doing quite a lot of Louis, and I sort of thought it was maybe a little bit weird doing that, but I was doing loads of impressions and I was having a great time doing it. And
he's dropping bombs. He's dropping bombs, Lazlo.
I just closed my eyes. And I literally thought I was on a Zoom call with Louis Theroux.
So what I like about, because I think Louis is probably one of my favorite of your impressions, and he's just such a sort of disarming guy who will, he'll go to these really bizarre places and just find out these extraordinary stories and interview people extremely candidly and kind of matter-of-factly. And you're actually doing a very good Louis look at me now. I almost feel like I'm in a room with him, but he'll go, "Hi, I'm Louis from the BBC," and he sort of walks into their house.
And I don't know if you are sort of a big fan of Grounded, certainly like I am. I really enjoy it. And in Grounded, he sort of started to do that sort of maybe more sort of psychotherapist thing, where he's sort of just checking in. How are you doing? How are you feeling? Could we talk a bit about? Are you sort of comfortable going here? Could we? And
what's amazing is you'll have this American gentleman who'll be, he's got some weird thing where he's got like 10 wives or whatever, and Louis will have decided to infiltrate this community. And he'll go in and say, "Hi, I'm Louis from the BBC," and he'll go, "Oh, hey, Louis, I've got my 10 wives here," and they'll all be lined up, and he'll sort of say, "Oh, and this is your wife, your Samantha," and he'll sort of say, "Samantha, what do you think?" And she'll say, "Oh, well, Bill sleeps with all these women every night," and he goes, "And you're okay with that?" And she's like,
But that's, what's funny about him as a presence, I think, is that like over the years, I feel like he's become a lot more empathetic and is really kind of tuned into the human sadness of a lot of the stories that he looks at. Whereas at the start, I think he himself would admit that he was, which I found hilarious, by the way, but he was very like glib and very like piss taking of all these people. It's like, so do you really think that aliens are gonna be landing on the Earth? I mean, that seems a bit delusional, doesn't it? And there's a sort of mockery, which I think he cringes at, but I think it's really funny.
Yeah, because the early stuff is much more in that ilk, isn't it? It's kind of the shock factor, the wow factor. Let's go and look at some crazy people and report back and seemingly be quite earnest. But no, he's got.
I also think one of his best skills is actually letting silence just do the work. He stands there. He's posed an initial question, and he just lets them basically stew, or start to say things which they've not even been asked about. And I think that's a great skill of an interviewer and a journalist.
Yes, I think a lot of interviewers fall foul of that. And also, I think the coolest thing about Theroux is that he doesn't really ever let his opinions on things come to the fore. And a lot of documentary makers do. And it just becomes, here's an hour of what the documentary maker thought to begin with. Whereas Louis is so good at making you make your own conclusions, I think.
Yeah.
And occasionally he'll come at the end, with, on balance, I sort of thought this was a bit weird and generally... but mostly it's sort of like he lets you make your mind up, which I really like.
On balance, I guess it is quite weird for people to shag their chimpanzees, but who am I to judge?
I wanted to find out
that
more.
Was probably bad. Yeah.
Oh God. Okay. Fine. So we this is wonderful. We're doing a nice sort of segue in between your life story and these many different characters. And okay, so you jumped into your Theroux, your Gordon Ramsays. By the way, that was excellent. We didn't even jump into that, but actually, can you just
thank you, big boy. Wow.
Can you just say to Laszlo, what is it that he's something like an idiot sandwich or something?
Yeah, please. I'd like you to do that to me.
Well, no, it's that.
You've forgotten the lamb sauce or something?
Yeah, Laszlo, the fucking bass is fucking raw, you donkey. Wow.
And there's always the kind of quite brave contestant who's just like, fuck off, Gordon.
Yeah. And then he's like, hey, fuck off. Why don't you fucking put your head in a fucking oven, you shit. Wow. I love it. No, he's great. But one of the funniest things as well is that the contrast between him doing like all of those shows, which by the way, you definitely couldn't do now because the abuse on show in Hell's Kitchen just wouldn't fly. Yeah. But like back in so there's the contrast between that and then like him dealing with kids on MasterChef Kids. And he's like, hey, listen, I don't want any girls to be crying in my kitchen. Okay. So I'm not going to go until you've smiled. And you're like, Jesus, he's a human. And then suddenly he'll turn around like, you fucking prick! Jesus.
What I love in Hell's Kitchen is, because I've watched a lot of Hell's Kitchen and I've also read a lot about the filming of Hell's Kitchen. And there are a lot of testimonials where, the people participating in the episode are kind of like, yeah, it was quite weird because he didn't really film with us at all. And he kind of, he steps in for half an hour a day and he just starts swearing at us. So he's been there for none of the episode. Then he just goes into the kitchen. It's like, you fuckhead, you absolute fuckhead.
Yeah. You should find this on YouTube if you haven't watched it. There's an early documentary of him when he's going for his third Michelin star with Gordon Ramsay, and he's also got Patron and a few other restaurants. And he's so hard on the chefs, but all the chefs seem to have this common understanding that it's like, okay, he's being an asshole, but it benefits me in the long run because I'll be a way better chef. And there's something interesting about that relationship. It's a bit like the relationship, in Whiplash between the drum instructor and the main character. I think there's something to be said for that.
There's probably a symbiotic like Stockholm syndrome-y vibe of,
there's maybe that as well. Yeah,
that you're gonna get ahead, but also you probably quite like being shouted at, and you
trapped in Gordon's kitchen. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like some sort of odd sexual fantasy.
with the lamb sauce.
Theroux would be all over it.
Yeah.
So could I just clarify? You want Gordon Ramsay to sort of throw a burning hot souffle on your face? We've gone to a very blue area in the podcast now. I don't know if I think that's a bit weird. Sorry.
That's okay, Louis. No worries. Anyhow, okay. So you slid into Gordon and Louis. It's almost like going through kind of Picasso's various periods as an artist.
I would say that. I would say that parallel's been made before, and I'm pleased.
Is that your Twitter bio?
Now. Yeah. It's Picasso if he were living today.
Yeah, exactly. But you are getting perhaps more recognition than Picasso. Picasso didn't have 100,000 bot or otherwise adulating fans peering in through his window trying to.
I think that's a difficult thesis to defend. That I have more notoriety than Picasso. What were we saying? Yes. So I started doing other impressions of people. And then I started working with a radio station doing sort of topical bits of impressions on their station. And then that year I did Dead Ringers, which was very fun. And I did a few started doing more political people like, like Jacob Rees-Mogg with that sort of very, lilting drawl like that. And I did him on Dead Ringers with John Coleshaw and Lewis MacLeod, and it was really fantastic. Nanny was thrilled. And then from there, I kind of started doing more Radio 4 stuff. I'd done Edinburgh at this point. I was doing like the Now Show and bits and pieces. Yeah, a lot of stand-up. And then from there, started doing a bit more stuff on social media. Obviously, lockdown happened. And then I just sort of, because I had no stand-up, I just wanted somewhere to, get affirmation from people. So
so an interesting question that I have is around the impressions. But so you say you do stand up as well. Like, to what extent is the stand up based on the impressions? Do you make your own routines and jokes and sketches, or is it very much you doing your impressions? Like, to what extent are the impressions you versus using them as a springboard for other stuff?
It's they're probably more like iterations of ideas. In that you'll assert something that's hopefully funny and is a joke, and then you can act out that idea. So I talk about being sort of confessionally posh at points, which is very similar, of course, to sort of Hugh Grant, or how Hugh Grant would be in Four Weddings and a Funeral, and then just acting that out and being like, oh, shit, well, gosh, crikey, in those, the seminal words of James Blunt, you're beautiful. No, shit, sorry, not that. I suppose I better go and kill myself, if that's all right with you. And so it often becomes sort of like acting out ideas. But I think from kind of in 2019, I started doing more characters and enjoying character comedy a bit more, because I felt like it's just a bit more sort of, it felt a bit cleverer to do something like that. And I enjoyed how you can take the piss out of certain groups and whatever the establishment is. I know that's a bit of a grandiose term, but yeah, so I started doing that and sort of would say that's mostly what I do now.
Josh, I'm interested in, with the accents you've got, and presumably you're always looking to develop new accents or new characters. How do you go about the process of fine-tuning an accent? How do you practice them?
Laszlo is absolutely determined to take notes. He's literally got his pen there. Like, how do we do it?
Yeah. In other words, tell me your secrets.
It's more of like, I think anyone who does impressions or accents will tell you it's like a sort of weird condition, and my poor long-suffering girlfriend has to deal with me just constantly. When I was learning to do Hugh Grant, or just constantly going, shit, fuck, gosh, try, just endlessly. And you have to become obsessed with the people or the accent that you're doing, and it's not even fun. It's like an impulse. You're just like desperately trying to practice and do it. It's like I think that's probably the best way I could describe it. It's not, you're not enjoying it at that stage. You're just kind of impulsively doing it.
But this reminds me of it's like sort of is he called Damian Lewis, who's the famous method actor who lived as a year as Abraham Lincoln and then got his Oscar at the end of it, and his wife was like, it was an absolute nightmare living with Abraham Lincoln for a year. Whereas your poor girlfriend living with Hugh, lucky living with Hugh.
Well, incidentally, I believe she's quite partial to Hugh. I as I understand it, many women are. But no, but even she, who she would readily admit is very attracted to Hugh Grant, found it very irritating.
So I do want to correct Ed, because Ed just claimed that Damian Lewis played Abraham Lincoln. It's actually Daniel Day-Lewis. It's not Damian Lewis of Homeland fame who played Abraham Lincoln.
The redhead guy, Damian Lewis. Is that? Am I thinking? Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, Daniel Day. I'm always making that mistake. I also think you have to be like really obsessed with detail and also interested in people. I think that can be quite a common trope of comics. They're not that interested in people, and I find people fascinating, and I love sort of observing people's little differences vocally and in character terms. So I think you have to have an interest in that as well to be able to do it, because if it's drudgery for you, then it's impossible to sort of do it. Do you know what I mean? Like, if it's hard work, you're not going to want to do it anyway. But yeah, I hope that's helpful.
Of course. Yeah, definitely. got lots of notes here. I'm just
Good.
showing the.
Yeah, lovely. Oh, that's a lot of notes.
Yeah. So I mean, that is happens to be a different sheet of paper. I was just doing it for the camera. So
I'm not.
yeah,
I promise, I'm not literally writing down every word.
I'm not literally. I've got a blank piece. If you want to see the blank piece, I took nothing down. No, okay. So are you currently working on acquiring any new characters? A little sneak peek maybe for the future.
Yeah, I think I definitely am. Yeah, trying to do some new characters. I think I'm working on a project at the moment that I can't talk about. Sadly, I wish I could.
Ooh.
But
Dangling a little bit of leg there.
Yeah, look at that.
Okay.
A little bit of Victorian
can we say
ankle.
this is an Earth calling preview?
It's an exclusive.
Yeah, I suppose you could say that. Yeah,
he's working on something, and
I'm working on. I'm doing something.
That. Yeah.
Josh Berry is doing something.
Yeah.
There we go.
I think the best thing is trying to create characters that summarize the current mood, isn't it? And that's something that Sacha Baron Cohen, I think, did so well in Who is America? This is America? Whatever, I can't remember exactly.
This is America,
yeah. And like particularly his liberal character, I thought was so clever. The Dr. Kane de Nirencello, or whatever he's called. I just thought it was such a, and it makes you cringe if you are a liberal person watching it and looking at the sort of grotesque overcorrection that character is a piss take or a satire of. And I think that was just so funny. But again, that's like a really good perceptive take on how things are at the moment. And I think I need to do a bit more observation on that, because I think the way that we look at politicians and politics is changing so rapidly. A year ago, Keir Starmer had unbelievable rep, whereas now it's in the gutter by comparison. I mean, I've been doing some stuff like on his first ever PMQs, and it's insane. I mean, he absolutely crucifies Boris Johnson, and yet still hasn't been able to garner any of the working class vote. So yeah, things are in a very rapid state of change, and that heavily affects the sort of stuff that you can do, I think, for that reason. But I think you have to adapt to the present moment.
Cool. I guess one thing I was really interested to know about basically your medium, or at least the medium through which I've experienced your comedy, has been Instagram. And of course you have your Twitter following. How does that work for you influencer wise? I noticed that you aren't kind of trying to sell me fake tan on your account, or nice kind of influence.
It's not for lack of trying it.
Yeah.
For lack of fucking trying, man.
Well, actually, Lazlo, perhaps we should reveal the only people who've got in touch with Lazlo and I is a company called Smooth My Balls, who, as you can probably imagine, not tennis balls, it's more the other one, and they want to basically send us products to plug. But do you get brands?
And actually, just quickly
and it's not an escort agency, is it? It's definitely it's definitely shaving.
To provide a bit of detail, by the way, we've got more of a lengthy message for them recently, and they said, so in the first kit, we will give you a pube muncher, hedge clippers, and $20 off the turf chopper.
We haven't yet reached the level where we're getting stuff for free. They're just sending us 20% off. It's just basically trying to sell their product.
That's really that's a bit ballsy. Sorry, no, that wasn't intentional. That was awful.
But so on that stuff, are there brands that you work with? Do people reach out? Like, how do you deal with how do you monetize your content?
Yeah, it's I mean, I'm not the kind of person to, but I'm not the sort of person to like say no to a brand deal, that's for sure. I think the thing with it is, it's like I guess the problem is a lot of what I do is take the piss out of things on my forum. So I think I can imagine brands are probably fairly hesitant to ask me to do it. Also, I'm not an attractive woman. I've got to accept that now. I've finally come to terms with that. And, that means it's harder to, I think, I do think that forum does tend to, if you are an attractive woman, it's much easier to sell stuff. People don't give a shit if I'm like, hey, here's this fake tan. I don't think that's what people are there for when they follow me. But also I don't have that big a following really in the grand scheme of things as far as Instagram goes. So it's, that's quite difficult to get that sort of stuff. But in terms of monetizing it, I mean, you just hope sort of more people come to your shows or listen to stuff you do, or producers watch it and think, oh, we could put this on TV or whatever. But yeah, it's kind of a bit of that. I do some sort of, I was doing a fair number of shows as my political advisor character, Rafe, like online, a sort of like a mock Q&A, which was very fun and and had the sort of crowd interaction that I really missed from not doing stand-up.
Was that a live stream?
I did do a live stream one, but I also did like private Zoom ones where you had like 100 people in, and you just which is really fun, really.
That's
good
awesome.
Yeah, I mean that tends to be the way that it gets monetized.
Has COVID kind of been, because obviously it's been terrible for gigging, but has it been? Do you think? I'm not going to say COVID has been net positive, but for you kind of for you professionally, rather than the world. Has it? Do you think it's been useful? Have I just stumbled across you late, or has your social media presence erupted because people are at home on their phones and watching Instagram, and you're developing these characters over the past year?
I think there's probably does play a reasonably large role. But I also do think, like we were talking about earlier, that a lot of it's from this Rafe character and my kind of piss takes of the government and all that stuff. And I think it was very heavily aided by the fact that a lot of people felt very similarly about the government for a while. And I don't think it's like that anymore, but I certainly around, this time last year, you've got Boris Johnson. I mean, people did feel sorry for Boris Johnson because he'd obviously nearly died with COVID, but, track and trace was fucked. PPE, 40% of doctors had to pay for their own PPE, which is pretty telling. It was generally in it, and the care home crisis, obviously, as well. And then you've got Dominic Cummings at the end of May last year and that enormous shitstorm. So that helped a lot because everyone was like, oh, we fucking hate the government. So me creating a very complacent, arrogant character who just, didn't give a shit about anything really rung true. Whereas now, whatever you think about it, the government's rep is a lot better because of the vaccine. Now that's not necessarily down to them, arguably, but people certainly feel a lot more conflicted, I think, or a lot more sort of generally positive, as this election has proved, right? Like, I think if we'd held this election a year ago, we'd probably see some different results. So yeah, I think it was the cohesion in opinion that helped a lot, particularly on Twitter, which is obviously very left-wing as a general rule. I think that probably is the biggest reason. But yeah, people being on their phones helped for sure. Absolutely.
And speaking of people on their phones, and because you've got quite a lot of exposure over the past year and a half on these social networks, I'm very curious to hear if you've got any stories about some super fans or super haters who, I don't know, trolls indeed, who slide into your DMs and say odd things to you.
It's not really, well, the thing about Twitter, and I sort of spend way less time on Twitter than I used to for this reason, is that it's the kind of platform where people will very readily come up and tell you that they think you're shit or you're a dickhead, or, it's your content is irrelevant because you went to a private school or something, which it's just not a pleasant experience, really, I think. And sort of after a while, it does sort of wear, you sort of grow a bit tired of that. And because generally the forum is just a very aggressive, angry platform, and I found that was really making me stressed and feel just a bit like, everyone's so cross about things, and I really hated that. So that happens. Instagram, as a general rule, tends to be a lot more positive. You don't really tend to see that much salty hatred. I wouldn't say I have. No, I don't have any super fans. Obviously, like, after this stuff happened, like, people sort of come up to you in pubs and stuff, and which is nice.
That's so great. Also, so you'll be out and about, and someone will be like, try and do their impression of you or whatever, and do people come up to you and say, "Oh, can you do X or Y or Z?" And do you then have to sort of begrudgingly, or not begrudgingly, maybe you?
But I think it depends to what extent I'm having a nice day or not. I think if I'm having a nice day, I'm like, I don't need that shit. Whereas if I'm having a bad day,
I thought it'd be the opposite.
No. If it's the opposite, I'm like, I don't need you. Fuck you. Whereas if I'm having a bad day and someone, I'm like, oh my god, yes, of course. Would you like me to name my first child after you?
Should I sign just above the bra, or where would you like it?
Yeah. But that's just that, again, that self-awareness just brings like such a huge amount of self-loathing comes along with that, because then you're like, oh god, why am I being so different for different people relative to the day that I've had? And also, why am I requiring that affirmation from other people, because it just feels like really pathetic, you know. But it does happen. But no, I can't think of anyone creepy who's turned up at my house.
Thank God. Yeah, exactly. We won't reveal where you are today on this.
Thanks.
The Horde. Yeah.
Although
cool.
Smooth My Balls will need your address. Will need your address.
That's okay. Well, I already work with them. I forgot to say that. I've been working with them for ages.
Okay, nice.
But just the escort agency, not the shaving one. So,
what could you be an influencer for? I'm just trying to think. Perhaps a cheeky hard seltzer for a nice summer's day on the Clapham Common.
That's a really good. That will be me if I were a drink. You know, cheeky, and in Clapham. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. I think
an entirely Clapham-based drink.
Yeah, you can't drink it anyway. It ceases to exist outside Clapham.
Not sold outside the environs of the Common.
Southwest London, yeah. I've never lived in Clapham, or indeed, I've very rarely been to Clapham, and yet I think so much of like how people perceive me is, oh, look, he lives in Clapham. But yeah, I think that's a good description. I don't know, what would be good? I don't know, like moisturizer.
Oh, okay.
Clear skin, I guess.
I'm trying to have a look. You do look rather moist, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I've often been described as moist.
Positively wet.
Past girlfriends have described me as moist.
Gosh.
Yeah. No, but not in that way, Hugh. In a sort of wet and clingy way.
On that note, I think we should segue into one of our segments on the show for today, which is the accent challenge. So, you know, we started off with you throwing a few curveballs around, Lazlo and I desperately trying to keep up. I think, Lazlo, you know, there are a couple of accents that we try and do on the show, and we'd love to know whether you have them in your locker, and we can perhaps sort of, you know, I don't know, develop a few different back and forths. So, Lazlo, we've already done your Rafa, but would you like to jump in with your Rafa, your kind of generic Catalonian goat farmer, or?
Yeah. So, Ed, I've looked at this nice little list you compiled, which is supposedly our home turf of accents, and I'm pretty sure most of these are kind of your strengths. I don't think I can do any of these. I think Rafa Nadal is there to kind of placate me. I will do. Okay, so in preparation for today, I watched a lot of clips online of, he just came second at the US Open, and he goes up to stage and he said, see, that's just not Rafa Nadal. I know this because I've just watched 2 hours of Rafa Nadal non-stop.
What's his name? Who's the golfer? The Spanish golfer.
Sergio Garcia.
Yeah, more that, you know?
Okay.
I think it's more... I think Rafa is more like... I don't know, but he's probably... something a little bit more in the back of the throat and with the nose. And well, I think for sure it's important to have the details now. So a lot of and well, so things like that.
And the eyebrow. Can you do the eyebrow? He has this. Yeah, exactly.
It's a fantastic one. I learned that when I was 17. You know how you learn to do that? You put your hand on one eyebrow and then you raise the other one. And then
really? Does that work?
Yeah, Jay, I promise you.
I should do that.
Incredible. Actually, my favorite thing Rafa does, and again, look, I actually don't claim to do a good Rafa Nadal. It's just, it's a lazy Spanish accent, but I do love it when he is at Roland Garros, and despite having won the thing 11 times, he still hasn't polished his little French spiel. He's always like, merci beaucoup. Je voudrais remercier le crowd de Roland Garros pour l'attention très bien.
It's so Spanish, isn't it? He's like, wow. Sí, je voudrais dire merci beaucoup à tout le monde. Donc, merci beaucoup. Je suis très heureux d'être ici. Whereas Djokovic is doing it loads.
You've had 12 years to practice.
But Djokovic is so eager to be liked that he comes out with pretty good French, like bonjour tout le monde, c'est moi, je suis très heureux d'être ici et de gagner le match. And like you're like, wow, it's pretty.
And then of course Federer, who is in fact Swiss, presumably. Do you have a Federer in the locker? A Federer in French, or do you want to do a Federer in English?
I think Federer, obviously, of course, like that. But I don't actually know his French. I think it changed a little bit the way that Roger sounds. I think his French is probably a little bit too good for me to do. But I think it's very sort of Swiss German, I think, whereas the French is probably like quite a good French accent. So it's a little bit different,
Very, very nice.
Incredible.
Gosh, yeah.
I used to get a lot of shit for that as a teenager because they were like, "Oh, his voice isn't deep enough," and then I used smooth balls, and then my balls dropped, and then I could do it.
And the rest is history. Yeah.
Just trying to get you guys that free sponsorship. That's
Thank you.
Not just the 20% off. Yeah.
yeah.
So back to this list, by the way, and we did a little segue into the Nadal. So I actually want to hype up my co-presenter Ed, because Ed does actually do some very good impressions, and I think the one that catches my eye from this list is Ed's Morgan Freeman, and I'm wondering, Josh, if you could potentially riff off Ed with Morgan Freeman.
I can't do that one. I'm going to have to leave the floor to Ed. I find I'm sure you'd noticed, I have, I'd say my voice is on the higher end of sort of medium in terms of pitch for a man. And I struggle with the lower voices. So someone like Coogan, I know plenty of impressionists who can like nail those people. But yeah, for me, Freeman is not possible. So I look forward to yours, Ed.
But you're right. The thing about Morgan is he's far more in the back of the voice, and he's quite kind of gravelly as a man, and has slight I don't know, southern twang to him.
There's something in it. There's something in that.
He's not convinced. Josh is not convinced.
What's
the quotes? What's the hang on? Let me try and do
the
the quotes. What is it? He says,
I get busy living.
Yeah,
I get busy
exactly.
dying.
It was I first met Andy Dufresne in 1957, and he said, either get busy living or get busy dying.
Well, I think that Morgan Freeman I thought you captured his vocal quality in that you got the sort of graveliness and the sort of, you definitely have the depth as well, as Coogan always criticizes Bryden of not having on the trip. He's always like, you don't have the depth when they're doing Sean Connery. Yeah, I think the accent needs a little bit of work. I think it needs to be more American, and I think you look up rhotic R's. I'm sure you're a linguist. You'll know.
Linguist, I am. Yes, my rhotic R's. Although I have
rhotic
to say,
R's.
Yeah, my rhotic R's and my aspirated H's. I'm just sort of deflecting because I'm not actually too sure what.
But it's in American accents have a very prominent R sound. Like so, you'd say like my brother bought 4 shirts. So there's a very prominent R. So I think that needs a little bit of work. But yeah,
this is great material, by the way, because I'm just writing notes and I've just got Morgan Freeman poor and then brackets judged by professionals. So it's just good to keep notes, as we're going through these. But
I feel like a bit of a charlatan because I don't do Morgan Freeman. So who am I to judge?
But but it's interesting that you mentioned American, because we do try, Lazlo and I, to do our American accents. So if there's do you have a kind of patchwork of can you pin your East and your West and your Texas, can you pin your different states on the map, or do you have difficulties with, or which is your favorite of the?
I haven't really been asked to do them that often, but like I suppose like from John McEnroe is from like New York, isn't he? Like John is like from Queens, I think. So he's talking a lot like that. So I suppose it's like New York. I can do pretty well, but yeah,
that's quite a sort of. Because the overhammed New York accent that we try and do is a bit more of a drawl, but that's a bit more Boston, maybe. I don't know, but And Lazlo, you have something where you used to talk about coffee, I think, or you just keep repeating the word coffee because you think that's
basically, it's a classic. All the Earth Calling listeners love it. I just go coffee on repeat.
Like Ruby Wax. There was sort of a bit of Ruby Wax in there.
Yeah.
Is that Ruby Wax? She's from there, isn't she?
Yeah. But then, okay, fine. But is there a kind of Minnesota? Is that where they go a bit more Canadian with the?
It's fascinating because it's the fascinating thing about. There's a really, really fascinating video on this by a guy. His name escapes me, but he's a dialects. Oh, Eric Singer, he's called. He's a dialects coach, and he does a whole video. He's genuinely. Anyone listening to this should watch it. It's fascinating. He does a whole video on how different American accents are formed, and how actually there are parts of America where they sound like they're from East Anglia, and it's all to do with immigration patterns. And obviously, like the Irish settlers in America are where you get that accent from. And I think I just find that so interesting. I think you get the same thing in like South Africa, because you can hear the descendants from like that very sort of posh 18th century English, sort of very, very posh way of talking, and that's not a million miles away from the South African accent. There's this. I just find this whole area so fascinating, but I wouldn't want to bastardize an accent that I know is done so well by this guy. So you should watch that YouTube video. It's Eric Singer.
I think with the South African as well, though, you've got that Dutch bit as well from the poor settlers, which makes it. Can you do a sort of South African? It's a bit harsher, isn't it? The kind of Dutch.
There's a tennis commentator called Robbie Koenig who's from South Africa, and he's always like, "Oh, that's jaw-dropping tennis. Stop it! It's incredible stuff from Federer." It's like that, but yeah, you're right. But I just think that's so interesting when you're like, you've got all these different fusions of culture and history, and we speak in them. I think there's something so cool about that. Even though I'm told to actually study that is quite dry. Apparently, like philology is very dry in practice. But
Lazlo was very into his linguistics, I think, but he is quite dry, so that would make sense. As opposed to moist Josh.
Is this my cue to talk about Ukrainian linguistics, Ed?
I think it is.
On that note, should we do our final little segment, which we can? Yeah. Okay, cool.
Well, you're not going to do your Hugh Grant, Ed?
I now sort of.
That was very good. That was very good. 10 out of 10.
That was great.
That was
actually,
excellent.
It's better. I think the fewer words you say, the better.
I think you're
again, I really try and sort of. I just want to
it's so much closer to your actual voice, because I think you've sort of if you forgive me for saying so, but you've really sort of poshed it up a little bit. And I actually don't think Hugh really is completely
Hugh sort of sounds like he's got a tremendous stutter, rather like King George, and sort of here I am, a man just standing in front of a woman, and I suppose
I suppose what I'm trying to say is I love your sister.
That's awfully sorry. I know it's awfully terrible of me to say that, but instead it's very much true.
And is that all right with you, Sarah? That seems a bit weird to me.
Hey, Sarah, fuck off, all right?
And nice? How does a chimpanzee factor into this relationship?
It's Fernando Alonso. Great. Yeah. Well,
is that it's Sergio Garcia / Alonso? Yeah.
It was okay. I thought it was some like niche Spanish zoologist, hence the chimpanzee. I don't really know.
Yeah, you guys don't know him. He's Lorenzo Enriquez. He's a leading entomologist.
It's dead on, believe me. I'll tell you someone I really like to do, but I feel like I can't quite do, is Jordan Peterson, because he's got such an interesting. I saw someone online to him, and it was so funny because he had that. He was like, the thing a lot of people don't realize about gender is it's like, right? Yeah. I can't do anything else.
No, I think he's not that high, is he? Or
no, he's not that high, but
he's pretty high. But he's
yeah, he does.
Man, you just think it.
It's like
But his voice breaks as well when he's speaking. His voice kind of breaks a little.
He's extremely excited about a point he's making.
I'm afraid I don't agree with. No, what the fuck am I doing? I play Frank Spencer.
Yeah,
I can't do that.
But surely that's misogynistic, Jordan. Oh, well, yeah. I am.
It's like right.
You gotta clean your room, for God's sake, man.
He's much maligned by the left, isn't he, Jordan?
He is. I think he's an extremely interesting guy. I mean, I certainly don't agree with everything that he says, but he's very articulate, and I think he's become a bit of a what would be the word, standard bearer, maypole, a straw
man as well.
A straw man, many things.
A man of many
metaphors.
But he's, I think the biggest thing that anyone could really learn from him is that he defines himself, although this is a little bit questionable, but he's like, I'm not an ideologue, which I think is really important. Although arguably he is a little bit of an ideologue because he's quite set on like stereotypical conceptions of gender, I suppose. But the idea of not being certain and, not being completely rigid in your worldview, I think a lot of people could learn a lot from.
When the facts change, I change my opinion. Can't remember who said that. But
I get fucking smashed by the left for this.
Freeman.
I believe it was the great eschatologist, C.H. Dodd, who said, that's the best way to do Hugh, by the way. You just normally it's best if they're dead, but you sort of mentioned, like, in the words of the late great A.A. Gill, I believe it was said, "'Tis nobler to be a chap than
a
I've
chapstick."
forgotten. Yeah, you're quite right.
Oh God. Okay, so on that note, we're going to jump into a quick fire final segment with Josh, who's going to be on his toes. And this is the first time we've done this, but we'll see how it goes. We move to the final section, which is Influencer Island. Okay, so we would like to drop you as a man of influence onto an island, similar to Desert Island Discs.
A man of influence.
And you get to bring with you a mobile phone, of course, but you have to choose which apps you get to have on that phone, and you get to take one luxury item. So there's no discs because you've got all your music on your iPhone. But what apps would you be bringing with you to pass the time, and what would be your luxury item that you take with you?
So my question to you is, am I getting off this island, or will I decease on the island?
Will you decease?
Yeah. I could be a dickhead and be like, a plane so I can fly away.
Oh, okay.
I'm not going to say that.
This
I don't want to undermine your
wishes.
Yeah, exactly. Third wish. Yeah.
Infinite genies.
So you are not getting off the island. So you will decease there. Yeah.
Well, item. Do I get to bring up a human? That would be nice. Can I do that?
No humans. No.
But what if I objectify the human?
Oh. Wow. Ooh. Well, we wouldn't want you on our podcast.
Yeah, right.
Then you're an awful person.
Then you're a bad guy. No, obviously I wouldn't do that. Oh, probably a speaker, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, because I bought one recently, and oh my God, did it enhance my life. Nice. You don't think it does, do you? But
have you got the UE Boom, or are you sort of level up from that?
I've got a Sonos.
Sonos. Okay.
Yeah,
you like your palindromic speaker brands, do you?
Have I got someone to charge this? Is there a USB on this island?
Let's say you've got a solar panel and a nice little port.
Yeah, actually, maybe not. Maybe I probably want to drink myself to death. So if I've got some sort of way to distill alcohol, like coconut alcohol.
We've decided though that you're, already going to be an influencer for this lovely hard seltzer brand that's based in Clam. So perhaps just a flagon of that we could keep cool in like an igloo box.
Well, that's true, but then that wouldn't replenish. So I get to the end of the boozing. So I feel like I've got to have some sort of way of manufacturing booze. So probably that, to be honest, because you're not going to want to be tapped into your own reality.
I'm actually a bit disappointed you forgot that we're legally obliged to say you would bring the pube muncher with you.
Oh, sorry.
Island.
I want to make sure that I'm looking extra. My pubes are looking extra trimmed for all the toucans that are on that island.
Instead, you're going to be brewing up some coconut liqueur.
Liqueur or coconut flavored booze. Something like that. I think you'd have to do that. Yeah, and then so apps, definitely not Twitter. That's for sure. That receptacle of hatred. Probably YouTube. I while hours of my life away on YouTube. But yeah, I think it would be that. Like I was saying earlier, I really find people fascinating. I love learning about them and what they think and what they like and don't like and stuff. And then so YouTube would give me a good opportunity to just observe and probably watch bits of Theroux as well, which would be nice.
You keep you company.
That would be my app of choice, I think.
Well, I think that is just about all we've got time for, but it has been an absolute pleasure. We have been delighted to have Josh with us on the podcast today and have really been in awe at some of his accents, impressions, and general wit and wisdom. So thank you so much, Josh, for being with us.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it. We must drink something non-alcoholic together at some point.
We must,
if we're allowed by the powers that be.
I'm really glad that our listeners now, obviously, having heard your accents, have no reason to come back to our podcast because we are frankly fraudulent in comparison. But it's been great having you with us.
Oh, thanks for having me. It was super fun. I'm Louis Theroux, and you are listening to the Earth Calling podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, please leave a positive review on Apple Podcasts, preferably 5 stars if that's all right with you. Subscribe to the podcast and even share it on your social media. Also, make sure to follow us on Instagram, and you can listen to past episodes or indeed future ones where you get your podcast normally. So Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or indeed anywhere else. See you next week. Do everything Louis said. Okay, it's me, Gordon Ramsay. Or fuck off. Wow.
That is scarily good. Thanks again, Josh, for joining us. Next week, Earth Callers, please do join us for an episode on the top requested app from our listeners on social media. And that is, of course, the dating app Tinder. Whether you swipe left or swipe right on that episode remains to be seen, but please do keep those location settings turned on and tune in for what will be a fantastic episode. In the meantime, Earth out.